So we're going to start now by talking to Peter Gediel, whose son was killed on 9/11 in the World Trade Center. Let me ask you, Peter, should Americans fear Islam?
Well, I'd like nothing better than to say that I was not afraid of Islam. I'd like nothing better than to say to my Muslim friends and fellow citizens, welcome to America. I'm glad you're here. Make yourself at home. But the fact is that we have too many history of Muslim terror attacks, and many of them so-called homegrown, second generation. And I think to ignore that threat is to ignore the history of Islam.
Donna Marshall Connor, you also lost a daughter.
Yes.
You lost your unborn grandchild.
Yes.
Do you think you, America, should be afraid of Islam?
I think Americans should fear criminal behavior. I think we should do the best we can to control criminal behavior. But I can't raise my two remaining sons to fear the people who live next door to them. That is not what my grandparents came to America to escape. You know, we are a group of 9/11 family members. I know a lot of family members are here. We share that pain. And, you know, I think the unfortunate piece of this is that we don't agree on this.
Let me ask you, Reverend Graham, you have said, and you said not so long ago, that President Bush and President Obama made a great mistake when they said that Islam is a peaceful religion. It's not, you said. There's no evidence in its history. It's a religion of hatred. It's a religion of war. And repeatedly you've said that Islam is wicked and evil. Why do you say that?
First, Christiane, I understand what the Muslims want to do in America. They want to build as many mosques, cultural centers as they possibly can so they can convert as many Americans as they can to Islam. And I understand that.
That's your position.
Sure, and I understand what they're doing. And I just don't have the freedom to do this in most Muslim countries. We can't have a church. We're not able to build synagogues. It's forbidden. But let me just say something about Islam. I love the Muslim people. But I have great difficulty with the religion, especially with Sharia law, and what it does for women, toward women, toward non-believers, the violence that is given under Sharia law.
Imam Osama Bahlul of Tennessee was listening intently.
Is it allowed under Sharia law?
Please let me say this. I am so sorry about anyone lost to any member of in September the 11th. We denounce this, and we feel so bad, and we share sadness with everyone. Went through such an experience. For someone to say we are not allowed to build a church in a Muslim country, this is absolutely not right. You can Google this.
Okay.
You can go to church in Egypt, a church in Syria. The oldest church, we have it in the Middle East. This is something. For you to say Islam is asking Muslim to beat up women, this is absolutely not right.
Let me ask you, Robert Spencer, should America fear Islam, and why?
Well, Islamic jihadis point frequently. They actually consistently explain and justify their actions and try to make recruits among peaceful Muslims by pointing to texts of the Quran, the actions of Muhammad, and the teachings of Islamic law. And so this is something that moderate and peaceful Muslims have to confront, but instead they always just displace responsibility and blame the people who are calling attention to these things. And then, of course, you have even peaceful Muslims like the Imam Rauf advocating for Sharia, which does deny equality of rights to women. It does deny the freedom of speech. He even calls for restrictions on the freedom of speech. He even calls for restrictions on the freedom of speech in his book, What's Right with Islam. And, you know, you talk about that Islam doesn't allow for wife beating. Well, it's in the Quran
Robert
to
Spencer,
beat your wife. And also, there's a television show in Saudi Arabia where they discuss the right implements to beat your wife with.
I want to turn to Daisy Khan, who, obviously, you've just mentioned her husband, Imam Rauf. What do you answer to what Robert Spencer has just said?
Well, let me assure all Americans that the vast majority of Muslims around the world and in the United States, we are living a peaceful life. We are law-abiding citizens. We have people in the armed forces. My own niece, who's in her early 20s, went to Iraq for 2 years and just came back from there. Young Arab American born in this country, served the nation to keep it secure. We have 1,000 police officers just in the New York Police Department, keeping the city secure
I want to turn to Azhar Nafisi and ask you, you fled the Ayatollahs of Iran. You are an intellectual, you're a writer. Should people fear Islam?
I came here to America because I expected that that image which those people had imposed on us will not be imposed on us again. And look at my surprise, from both sides of the aisle, what you hear is that there is one Islam. If we think there is only one Islam, then we have to take sides. Either it's evil or it's good. But there are as many interpretations of Islam as there are Muslims.
I would like to go to Reza Aslan, who is joining us from Amsterdam and who is a scholar on these matters. Reza, you have heard just right now several points raised. One is that Muslims in this country are trying to bring Sharia law. Is there a shred of evidence for that?
No, not a single shred whatsoever. I think somebody needs to remind Franklin Graham that we don't judge our values in the United States by comparing them to what the Saudis do. This is a common refrain that you hear from a lot of anti-Muslim activists in the United States, including Robert Spencer, that, well, if in Saudi Arabia you can't have a church, then therefore in the United States you shouldn't be allowed to have mosques. This is an appalling and laughable argument.
You know, we can have an argument, and I'm not here to argue. As a Christian, I believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no man comes to the Father in heaven except through Him. I don't believe in Islam. I don't believe a word of it. I do respect their right to believe whatever they want to believe. My opinions are not based on hearsay. My opinions are based on 50 years of working in Middle Eastern countries. I'm 58. I was 8 years old when I made my first trip to Egypt. And I've been to Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia. I've worked in these countries. But I disagree, Christian, with the Sharia law, because they do stone women. They do imprison. I've worked in the Sudan where they burned over 1,000 churches. 1,000.
Who is they? I mean, Azhar Nafisi said something very important. There are 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. It is unquestionably the most diverse, the most eclectic religion in the history of the world. This concept of just using this word, they, to describe 1.5 billion people is actually the definition of bigotry.
Well, let me just ask you something.
Who is a Christian, Reverend Graham? Who is a Christian? The Inquisition claimed to be Christians. The gay Episcopalian bishop is a Christian. The Methodists are Christians. The Baptists are Christians. Sarah Palin and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton are all Christians. Who is to say which one is more Christian than the other? No. And that is the point about Islam. I am not defending it. I lost my cousins were executed, who were Muslims. They were executed by this regime. My best students were executed by this regime. I was deprived of my identity as a woman. Some might be evil, but we're not all good. No. That is the point.
Hold on, please.
Well, when we talk about, there are millions of Muslims in this world that are wonderful people who don't beat their wives, who don't practice honor killings.
Why do you call it a wicked religion, an evil religion?
I think to take your daughter because you think that and the religion gives you the authority, Sharia gives you the authority for honor killing. And we saw the young girl in Ohio just a few.
But does it?
Does not.
It does.
Does not.
It does.
No, no,
It's used to justify those honor killings.
Justify it.
No,
It's used to justify it. You can't deny it. It's used to justify it.
It's
used to justify these things.
Justify it from the
You have a
Quran.
young lady in Ohio.
You will admit that it's used to justify it.
Now hold on. He said someone can kill his daughter because and the religion support him. Justify this from the Quran. Go ahead.
Your people justify it from the Quran.
Hold on. He said that.
You may not like it, but they justify it in the name of the Quran.
Please, sir. We have people, Christian, Muslims, and Jewish, and the other, misuse the holy books. It's understandable. I do not deny this. But I am saying the extreme majority of the Muslims, they have a proper understanding toward this religion. And in refer to your point, I agree with you. I am not expecting from everyone to become Muslim as well.
But let me ask Daisy. This is something that everybody talks about. We've had questions, masses of questions through our Facebooks, through many, many people who've tried to contribute to this program. Basically, where are the voices of the moderates speaking up?
Well, the moderates are speaking out. I happen to be one of them. I was devastated by the event of 9/11, and I had to quit my corporate career, a lucrative corporate career, to ensure that we would create a counter momentum against extremism so that another 9/11 does not ever happen again.
What do you want to do with the Islamic Center, which so many people have
Well,
caused
exactly.
so much
So
controversy about?
this particular center will create a counter momentum against extremism because it will amplify the voices of moderate Muslims which have gotten drowned out over the years by the extremists, because the extremists did not only hijack the planes, they hijacked an entire religion.
Okay, let me just stop you there for a second, because this side is obviously the side that says one shouldn't fear and that there are moderates and the whole religion should not be painted with the same brush. I want to, though, now go to Amjad Chowdhury in London. You have said that you think there should be Islamic domination. Why shouldn't people be afraid of that?
Well, let me just say that Islam has a solution for all of the problems that mankind faces. If you want to live at peace with Muslims, we are quite willing to live at peace with you. But let us remember that history did not begin on 9/11. Before 9/11, the American government bombed Sudan and Afghanistan. They were supporting the pirate state of Israel. So 9/11 was a reaction. You know, I think that we need to get away from the stereotyping. And this idea that you have moderate Muslims and you have radical Muslims is complete nonsense. A Muslim is the one who submits to the command of the Creator. If he submits, he is a practicing Muslim. If he is not, then he should be practicing.
I have to disagree with him because Islam is a religion of pluralism that embraces all religions, and it also embraces different interpretations. This is why we have so many schools of thought. What Anjum is talking about is an exclusivist view of Islam, which is my way or the highway. And my interpretation is the only interpretation.
You know, it's very easy for people to justify the fact that they're not practicing. I mean, this lady in your studio, she should be covering with the khimar and jilbab. She's obviously not practicing. And there are many people who are justifying, their inability to practice the Sharia, to say, well, I have a different form of religion. You know, people want to claim that they're vegetarians and they're eating big beef burgers. You know, you cannot be a non-practicing vegetarian. Therefore, similarly, you know, if you're a Muslim, you submit to the Sharia.
He's telling the truth.
You see, Reverend Graham says you're telling the truth. So do you agree with Reverend Graham and our panelists on this side that Americans should fear Islam?
We do believe as Muslims, the East and the West will one day be governed by the Sharia. Indeed, we believe that one day the flag of Islam will fly over the White House. Indeed, there's even a narration of the Prophet where he said, the day of judgment will not come until a group of my ummah conquer the White House.
Okay.
Can I just make one comment here? Because, look, you know, I'm not an expert in religion, but I do know that in some fundamental sense, I just heard Reverend Graham make the same statement about Christianity. I mean, you know, look, I'm sure you can fill up every one of these TV screens with extremist people from all over. We have laws in America. I think we ought not to get into whose religion has created more horror on earth. You know, suffice it to say that many political ends have been met by many religions and vice versa. And look, you know, I'm looking around, I see nothing in this room but war, and you know, it's painful to me. This is painful.
Do you, Reverend Graham, think that this Islamic radical who we just heard from is agreeing with you?
Not agreeing with me, but his position. What I was talking about Sharia law, what scares me, and he is speaking that Sharia law needs to govern the entire world, and that is the goal of the Islamists.
I just want to go to Reza Aslan, who's busy shaking his head from Amsterdam.
No, I was just enjoying the conversation, and I think that Amjad and Franklin Graham ought to go grab a cup of coffee because they see the world in exactly the same way. There is no such thing as one Christianity, no matter what Franklin Graham thinks. There is no such thing as one interpretation of Islam, no matter what Amjad thinks. The key here, though, is we're talking about the United States of America. We're talking about the 6 to 8 million Muslims in the United States who are thoroughly integrated into every level of American society. A community that is wealthy, that is moderate, that has thoroughly absorbed American values and made it their own, and feels completely comfortable reconciling their Islamic values with American values.
Okay.
To constantly compare American Muslims to Saudis or Iranians it's a ridiculous comparison.
All right. Pew Research researched the young males coming out of mosque in America, and they went across the United States. Between 18 and 33, that 1 out of 4 agreed with suicide bombings. Now, this is Pew Research, okay? These are not my numbers. You can check it for yourself. This is a frightening statistic. And I believe the mosque in America, the majority of the mosques in this country have been hijacked by the radicals and the Islamists who want to destroy this country.
Agreeing with Franklin Graham is Ayan Hershey Ali, who joined us by satellite. She was raised a Muslim in Somalia, but fled her country and renounced her religion. She has since received death threats for condemning radical Islam.
Islam is partly a political ideology, and a brilliant example of that is someone like Amjad Chaudhry, who just joined us. And I think that it is very important that not only Americans, but Westerners in general and Muslims, moderate Muslims, the ones who identify themselves as moderate Muslims, take the threat of the agents of political Islam very, very seriously. And every day they win hearts and minds. They establish Muslim centers. Their movement was very little, but it is growing rapidly, and it's very, very dangerous.
Just how dangerous? When we come back, a former FBI agent on The Real Threat. But is this targeting all American Muslims?
You may, for all I know, not be the moderate you pretend to be.
Have you looked in my heart? Have you
No.
cut my
No, I
chest
don't.
and
You're
looked
right.
in my
You're right.
heart to see what my intention is?
We also want to know what you think. Weigh in now. Go to abcnews.com or my Facebook page and tell me whether our discussion here is changing your views of Islam and Muslims in America.